Hi, everybody. Welcome to Jumping Instructors Live. We're so excited to see you here today, and wait until you see who we have to share with you. It's none other than Susan E Harris. Now, she has had an impact. I can't even say it right here because, Susan, you have had an impact on so many of our lives with what you've done with your illustrations and all the work you've done behind the scenes with everybody. So the topics that Susan's going to talk about today, we're going to talk about the classic jumping position, why it works. Are your riders standing or folding over fences? Stirrup placement for balance and keeping the spring in the rider's position. From grabbing mane to automatic release, a graduated system of releases. I'd like to introduce my two co-hosts today. We have Laura Kelland-May. If you could raise your hand, please.
Right here.
Right there. She's my producer. She's also a Canadian equestrian. Did I say it right? Or is it equestrian?
Yep, that's
Canadian
right. No.
equestrian, senior hunter, jumper, equitation judge, and steward. She's also a competition coach specialist for Canada. And then down below me, this is Patty Downing-Nygaard. She's a USDF. Hello, Patty. Big R judge for hunter, jumper, equitation, and
that would do it.
That would do it. That would do it. And then, of course, our special guest, we have Susan Harris, and she's the author, well, as we know, the author and illustrator of Horse Gaits, Balance and Movement, Horsemanship and Pictures, Grooming to Win. She's the one who rewrote all the U.S. Pony Club manuals. She is pretty amazing. She's renowned. We know more. Well, anyway, we'll get more into Susan soon. But we have so much to share with you. We're really excited about this show today. Laura, would you like to take it away?
Yeah, thank you very much, Randy. And thank you so much, Susan, for coming and being on our show today. Really appreciate it. And thank you so much, Patty and Randy. And I'd just like to introduce Randy. Randy Thompson has been coaching and certifying riding instructors for over 25 years. She's a horse industry legal consultant and expert witness and the founder of Jumping Instructors Network. So very thankful, Randy, to be here with you and with everybody. Now, as we're going
for all of us.
As we're going on through the broadcast today, you may see us looking here, looking up, looking here, looking up. It's because we're getting comments. We're receiving comments. If you have comments for Susan or Patty or me or Randy, then please put them in the comments, and you'll notice that we'll be looking at the screen as well as talking with you. And if you know somebody that you think should be here, watching, listening, getting involved with this, please send them an email, a text, a comment, something, share this with them, because there's going to be some really valuable information. So thank you, everybody, for coming. Now, our first topic is the classic jumping position and why it works. And Susan, this is only an hour broadcast, and we've got lots of stuff to do. So
fast it goes too. It's like, wow.
Yeah. So what did you want to share with us about the classic jumping position and why it works? And we do have photos, so keep in mind that we do have photos that we're going to share and images and artwork that Susan has prepared for us. So Susan, when you would like something for me to show it, just please tell me.
Well, why don't we start with the photo of Bill Steincross? Because when we're talking classic jumping position, it's nice to show what we're talking about. Bill Steincross, when you think classic jumping position, Bill Steincross is the name that comes to mind. Bill died just a few years ago, but he was Olympic gold medalist, silver medalist. He was the captain of the USET forever, and he rode in the classic position, not because it was pretty, but because it works. And back in the day, everybody tried to imitate Bill Steincross, some with more success than others. I think he's the one to go back and look at, but there are so many more. And when we're talking classic jumping position, I think what we're saying is balanced position where the leg is under the body the rider is really in balance with the horse. And if the horse disappeared, the rider would land on his feet.
Right.
And you need angles at your hip, angle at your knee, heels down, flat back, eyes ahead, and the hands and arms are free to release in whatever release works for that particular jump, that particular activity. And I think that we all really want to ride that classic jumping seat, but sometimes it gets taken in slightly different directions. Sometimes you see people who are riding with maybe a little too long a stirrup, and we're going to talk about that later in the show about what happens when you stand up instead of fold up. But I think this is a good picture for jumping instructors to have in their mind.
Yes.
Yeah. So what are the angles
position
that you're talking about that you like so much about this particular rider? I don't want to say Bill, but
right, Bill.
My best friend.
Any jumping rider. You've got three major angles: hip angle, knee angle, ankle angle. You also have the angle of the arms from the shoulders and at the elbows. And those angles depend on your joints, and your joints have to be free to work. Also depends on you being in balance, because if you are not in balance, you have no choice. Your body will tighten up to keep you from falling farther out of balance. So you lose the freedom of your angles if you are out of balance. In this picture, the rider is just perfectly in balance with that horse, and he can go with the enormous thrust. This is an Olympic-sized jump.
Yeah, I was going to say, how big is this jump? You know, it's not a 2'6" or.
Thing, but this is Bill Steinkraus jumping St. John, and I'm not sure if this was in the King George V Cup, but it was definitely in an international competition in Europe. And these are big fences.
Yeah. So what about the next one? Can I show the next one, Susan?
Yes, please. I was going to say, let's look at another classic jumping rider.
Oh, I love this one. This one is amazing to me.
Talk about big jumps. When I think of wonderful jumping form of horse and rider and why we ride the way we ride, this is the picture that flashes into my mind. This is Kathy Kusner back in the 60s setting a ladies' high jump record. I'm not sure if this was the jump that set the record or the time over the jump that set the record, but she is jumping well over 6 feet. I think the record at that time was 7 feet 2.
Well, look at this person here. I mean, say that man is 6 feet.
You can see it's well over the head of the man beside her. I also like that he has his foot off the ground, as all people do. All of jumping people do when we watch other people jump.
Yeah.
But if you look at her angles, she is totally with the horse. Her hip angle, knee angle, and ankle angle are closed, meaning her heels are really down, knees bent. Her body is almost parallel to that horse's body. And look at the bascule he's making over a maximum fence. And have you ever seen a release that allowed a horse more freedom than that?
Yeah. Does this horse have a bit? Does this horse have a bit in its mouth, or it looks almost like she's got the reins right onto a noseband or some sort of hackamore, a Basel or something?
Bitless.
That's Aberrali, and he was famous for going in a hackamore when nobody used hackamores for international jumping. So yes, that is a jumping hackamore. But I think the thing there is look at the angles, look at how she has fit herself to the bascule of the horse. And again, if that horse disappeared, she would still be in balance.
Yes.
Is that a big horse, or is this
people jumping really big? Pardon?
This woman who's riding, is she a petite person, or is that a big ginormous horse? I mean, look at where her foot is you know.
He was a fairly sizable horse. I'm not sure about the exact height. I think he was 16'2". And she was not particularly tall. Notice the photo's taken slightly from below, so it sort of changes the proportions a little bit. I mean, actually a lot from below. But I think you can really see the angles here. You can see we're looking up at her her chest and the bottom of her foot, her face. So it's not as perfect a photo for looking at angles, but this is the one that pops into my head when I think of why we jump the way we do. If you can, equitation isn't supposed to be for pretty, it's supposed to be functional. And that's about as functional equitation as I've ever seen.
Okay, so let's go on to the next one.
This is Frank Chapeau, the late great Frank Chapeau. He was captain of the USET on his stallion White Lightning. And I'm sorry,
this says Good Twist. It says Good Twist.
I'm sorry,
here.
Good Twist. Pardon me. Good Twist, who was Gem Twist's daddy. White Lightning is a different gray. And if you look at his form, he could be jumping today in a Grand Prix, except that the fence would be highly illegal today. That's a Swedish oxer. Those were banned years ago because they're not the safest jump for a horse to jump across. But look at his angles. He is folded up. Heel is absolutely down. If you extended the line of his stirrup straight up, it would cut him in half.
Yeah.
His seat is back, his shoulders are forward, and he is right in the middle. And in the day, nobody could turn and burn faster than Frank. He was famous for turning over fences, even over an oxer, which is asking a lot.
Right.
And turning in the air and continuing the turn on landing and making turns that looked impossible to anybody else. And would you say he's in a good position to do that?
Yes, over this huge oxer, yes.
Yep.
Okay, so who's next here? We have...
Oh, we got a more contemporary, Beezy Madden. And if we can zoom in closer on Beezy, it's a great picture, but I want to look at Beezy as close as we can. You notice how her leg position is exactly what the equitation gurus have been telling us we should be doing. You notice that her foot is about a third of the way into the stirrup. Her heel is down. The outside edge of the stirrup is turned slightly forward and inside edge back, stirrup leather vertical. And is that leg about as solid and secure a leg as you've ever seen?
Yeah,
and then look at the position.
That's a big jump.
That's a big jump.
Yeah.
Again, international level jumping. And yet, look at the position above it. She is in beautiful balance with her horse. Her back is almost parallel to his. Great angles at the hip, knee, and ankle. And it gives her the independent seat. I mean, she could do this with her arms straight out. She could do this with her hands on her head. I'm glad she didn't in an international class, but her position is so solid she could. And that means she can follow her horse's mouth absolutely accurately without grabbing onto the rein or catching her balance on the horse's mouth. Gives her
awesome. So it looks so smooth, but she's doing all that, but it's so soft. You can see that she's soft and following with the horse.
And also really dynamic. Now she can ride a strong horse or a sensitive horse, but a lot of it is due to this really independent seat. And one of the things that's really important in this picture, we can go on to the next if you want to, but in any of these pictures, is stirrup length. If your stirrups are too long, here's Denny Emerson. How many of you folks follow Denny?
Mm,
and there's Denny over a cross-country fence, and you can see that one has some speed to it. And Denny is always talking about leg position and how he didn't think his leg position was any good. Boy, in that one, I'll use Denny as a good example.
Right.
And you notice he is folded up right over his leg.
And I think that's a great point, Susan, and that is that many of today's riders, it seems like their stirrup leathers are a little long. You know, and that longer leg, they've gotten to where they're such a length that the rider can't get out of the saddle.
I have a theory about that. I don't know if it's true, but I think that people started riding with longer stirrups about the time a lot of equitation riders switched from thoroughbreds to warm bloods.
Oh.
And the warm bloods needed a lot more dressage. Many of them came quite well dressage trained from Europe. And Sure, on the flat, you may need a longer stirrup. But if you're going to ride jumping seat, hunter seat, you need your stirrups at the right length that you can fold up. And we're going to talk later about standing up, but if your stirrup is a little bit too long for what you're doing, you can't fold up, you have to stand up. And I think that's where a lot of the stand-up stuff came from.
I think you're right.
Anyway, Denny is perfect stirrup length, and to me, that is wonderful balance. It's too bad that the flag obscures some of it, but it actually serves as a pretty good vertical line to show you that his leg is really under him, just as Denny talked about.
Vertical, as you say, the vertical line going through the body. There it is.
You can see
we could extend the stirrups up. We can do that. Now, the other thing I should say is when you're jumping a really big jump or you're jumping at speed, there are times when you're going to get displaced. And anybody who has never jumped really big jumps or jumped really fast shouldn't criticize too much until they've tried it. But I think that's where the basic design of position comes in. If you have practiced and practiced, having good angles, having your leg in the right place, having the right length of stirrup, when things get hairy, you'll still be in reasonably good shape, even if you slip a little. This is one of my students from...
Getting back to the previous rider, and he was jumping, he was probably jumping at speed over a decent sized fence, right? So
at speed over a cross-country fence, it looks like.
Yeah. Okay, so this one is one of my
students back in the day on a school horse. He was a grand school horse. And this is again, I think it's a good basic design of position. Unfortunately, the front of his foot is obscured, but you can see his angles are good. He's folded. He's not standing up. He's close to the saddle, but there's absolutely no question of him being left behind or hitting the saddle. And the horse is free to make a really good bascule.
Right.
Lovely photo. And then this
too. This is one of my favorite pictures. This is Jim Cohn, and he is a little bit lower on the horse than is absolutely perfect. But I'd rather see him a little too low than a little too high. If that horse disappeared, he would look like a football lineman just about ready to start. He is in balance. And would you call that an independent seat? If he put his arms straight out, would he fall off? I think he's got great angles of ankle, knee, and hip, even though he's closed a little bit more at the hip than is perhaps totally ideal from a equitation standpoint. Notice the horse is giving this fence a lot of air. So sometimes a horse will jump up into you. I had a friend who had leased a fairly famous hunter for Devon. And she said when she came out of the ring after jumping around on that horse, she had a line of dirt down the middle of her hunt coat from where his braids had jumped up into her chest.
Nice. So there's a big difference, though. There's a big difference, though, between a horse jumping up to you and you going down to meet the horse.
Exactly. Well, that leads us into our next topic. And that leads us into our next topic.
If you duck too much, pardon me?
That leads us into our next topic.
Oh, okay. Sure does. Okay, whether we're standing or folding up. Let's look at the graphic on this one.
Okay.
We're starting with the bad one.
Starting with the bad one. I think we are, but let's see what we've got. Let's see what we got here. This is the one I think we talked about. Whoops, wrong one.
Oops, no, I'm sorry. We've got one more. This is a graphic of classic seat over fences, and I think the important thing is that your leg belongs to the horse. I'm going
to write that down.
I like that. You find the correct leg position with your calf on the horse and your heel down. Your joints absorb the thrust of takeoff, flight, the horse's changing body in flight, and the shock of landing. And your upper body is going to go with the flight. So while your leg is, you could say, almost Velcro to the horse, not stiff, but it's secure, your body's going to change relevant to your legs. So it's going to go forward, down, open up a little bit, and then open up a lot more on landing. So it's as though you're landing on your feet, not landing on your knees. And all of that allows you to go with the thrust of the horse's body and give him freedom to use his body the best he can, and also gives you the independent seat that lets you follow him through the air, or follow the crest of his neck, as the case may be, depending on your level and what you're doing. Can we see the next one? Here's what I call the seesaw effect. When a horse jumps, his front end goes sharply up. And if you were on a seesaw, it's like the front end of the seesaw rises up to you. And that's the most noticeable on takeoff. If a horse makes a very vertical takeoff, the seesaw goes way up. If it's a very small jump, the seesaw doesn't rise quite so much. And then over the middle of the jump, let's say the medium gray horse in the center, the seesaw is nearly level, and that's where we get beautiful picture of, you know, rider form. And then the seesaw tips down. If you were, let's say, on the back end of the seesaw, this rider is, the rider at the bottom is shown at the, you know, balancing alone at the pivot point of the seesaw. But if you had a kid on the other end, when your horse takes off, you should not stand up to try to kiss the kid on the other end of the seesaw. You'll lose your balance, and so will the other rider. And as the seesaw tips down, you wouldn't want to lean forward or you fall off. You wouldn't want to lean back or you fall off. You need to keep your balance right over the center. And this one is showing a fairly substantial bounce. So the rider really has to keep his legs secure, but not stiff, and let the seesaw effect close and open his angles to stay right over the horse's center of balance. If you can do that, and gymnastics are the place to learn it. Right. If you can do that, you can ride.
That's a great graphic.
That's in that idea is from, I wrote the jumping chapter in Sally Swift's second book, Centered Riding 2, Further Exploration, and we talked a lot with Sally Swift about the seesaw effect. Sally was quite a jumping rider in her day.
She was.
She didn't compete, but she had lessons from Vladimir Litauer and some of the famous instructors of her day.
She was so far ahead of her time.
She was.
Okay, so now we have
Okay, here's an exercise you can do, although you don't have to strip your rider down to the bare bones. On the ground, you would like to be able to take a jumping position, and this is sort of a moderate jumping position you use for cavaletti or small jumps. And if you were jumping bigger jumps, you would need to sink down farther. The springs, if you look closely, you can see the springs at the ankles, the springs at the hip, the springs at the knee, and you want to check your springs. And you can do this if you want to make sure your riders are getting heels down. Have them put their feet on a 2x4, or for little kids, it might be just a little smaller than a 2x4, and then sink down. You can say, we're jumping a little cavaletti pull, so you just sink a little bit. Okay, now we're jumping a bigger jump, sink a little more. Now pretend you're in the Olympics and sink a lot. And at the same time, they can make a release with their hands and arms. So this tells you, if you tried to stand up, you would stumble. And if it wasn't something to grab, you'd probably fall down on your hands and knees. But if you sink, you can really feel the springs. And that's what we'd like to get into people's muscle memory.
Right.
So I have a question about the springs and the person's spine and back. I can see the springs in your ankle joint where you're flexing your ankle, flexing your knee, flexing your hip. But how do you engage the spring in the back in your spine?
Those will engage automatically if you are not stiff, tight, and holding your breath. You have first you have the discs in between all your vertebrae. Mm-hmm. You also have tiny muscles that make a chain many, many, many muscles. They almost look like they're braided together to make a braided chain on either side of your spine. And those help connect your spine. Horses have those too, by the way. And those are going to work automatically. You don't do something to your back, but if you were holding your back rigid, rigidity in one place in your body is going to travel to all kinds of places you can't believe.
Yes.
My friend Peggy Brown does the visible rider, dressed in the bone suit. This could be Peggy, although we don't put springs on her and red lines. And she will do a demonstration where she says to the rider, I am going to stiffen something up, and I want you to see if you can guess what I stiffened. And people say, oh, look at her back got tight. Oh, look at her knees. Look at her neck. Look at her elbows. And the secret is she curled her toes inside her boots and grabbed the stirrup like a parrot on a perch. So stiffness in one place will travel all over, and especially in your back. You don't have to make your back springy. You just have to breathe and let your back do its normal thing. But its stiffness will get in the way of that.
Excellent. I would just...
Oh, just a minute. This is a great way for people to understand if they have the spring in their riding position is what this drawing is, Susan. I mean, you can actually stand on the ground yourself and just check. If you have the right spring, you will feel it in your ankles, your knees, and your hips. Many riders, as Susan was saying, as soon as they get on a horse or they start doing something complicated, unconsciously, they lock everything up. And that's when they lose their spring and they're sprung out of the saddle.
Or they hold their breath or something.
Right.
Yeah.
And that we can address with breathing and centering and various things about the mind-body connection. But the real principle is tension one place is going to go someplace else. So anything that induces tension or trying to hold yourself in the perfect position is self-defeating. So we have to say, oh, I didn't know I was so tense. Now, what can I do? Can I breathe? Can I shake it out? Can I find my springs? The other thing is I know jumping instructors like exercises. I want to give you an exercise I've done in so many clinics. Kids love it and adults love it. We go on a ride in this position. We have everybody in this position. And we say, okay, we're just jogging out cross country. Oh, here's a little log. Just hop over that little log and let your spring just a little. All right, now we're cantering. And we rock along, pretending we're cantering, letting the springs rock. Oh, hey, here's a little bigger log. It's about 2 feet. Ready? 1, 2, 3, springs. And now we're cantering down a woods trail. Oh, look, there's a coop. Ready for a 3-foot coop? A little bit bigger springs. Canter on. Oh my God, we jumped into a pasture and there's a bull. We got to jump out of the pasture ahead of the bull. Take your stirrups up, sink down. We got to gallop. Look, here comes a 4-foot fence. Ready? 1, 2, 3, big springs. Oh my God, I jumped into the neighbor's show jumping paddock. You know what's coming up in front of me? It's the puissance wall. But I'm on an old horse who was in the Olympics. So ready? 1, 2, 3, 6 feet. People have so much fun with that. You can make up your own version of the jumping ride, but it makes them grin. And even people who don't jump, usually their eyes get real big when I talk about jumping 4 feet and 6 feet, but you can do it on the ground.
Exactly. So before we go on to the next photo and the next let's see, the next thing, I would like to tell everybody to please, if you have a question or comments, or if you like what's going on here, please put it in the comments. Yes, I like this, what's going on, or I have a question. If there's something's not quite clear, please put it in the comments so we can clear things up for you if you have any questions or comment for Susan. Right. Okay. So let's see what we have next. Standing up.
Okay. That was the one I was thinking of.
That's the graphic we were looking for.
Is that the one you wanted?
Yes, that's the one I was thinking of. I'd forgotten we had a couple of good ones in between. So you can see here we have what I think of as the praying mantis position. And this is all done with good intentions. And it's often done because the instructor says, stand up, get up off your horse's kidneys.
Right.
And sometimes people do what I call taking out insurance. They don't want to get left behind. So they think if some forward is good, more forward must be better. And what would happen to that rider if the horse disappeared?
That's right. They'd
She'd
probably
land on her hands and her hands and her chest, wouldn't she? Even though she has her heel down. So the problem here is the rider has the heel down, but the stirrup's gone backward. She's opened her knee to stand up. And that blue dot represents her center of balance, and her center has gone forward instead of staying back over the saddle. Notice her back is also hollowed, and that's kind of a sign that she is really leaning hard on her hands. Now, we'll get to the crest release later on, but if you do a crest release, yes, you want to anchor your crest release. But if you lean your upper body weight on your horse's neck and you push yourself up and forward, you're teaching yourself to get ahead of your horse, not to stay in the middle.
I'd like to contrast this position that we see here to the first 5-6 photos that we looked at.
Zip back and look at some of the good stuff.
Do you want me to zip back there?
Sure, that would be great.
Okay, so let me go here.
Now, Patty, you do a lot of jumping. What do you see happening with most of the riders in the show ring? Oh, we can't hear you. Why can't we hear her?
Oh, it's because the dog was
barking.
Oh, right.
Yeah, the dog was barking at the mailman. I love this, and I love that last photo or drawing, because it's what we've seen and talked about every one time we've done one of these. Someone will send a picture, and that's exactly what's happened. And I love how, Susan, I love how you said it and what you talked about. It's just different words and different ways of saying the same thing that we've said, and it's perfect. It's exactly right. And Randy's a big one on, if you took the horse away, would you fall down, kind of thing. And I think in this day and age, we try to push the riders a little faster because we're afraid they're going to get bored. And it takes a lot of energy to keep them from getting bored. So I think that that we teach them to land on their hands and to grab the mane and to do that. And then you have to reteach them. And sometimes people fail to do that. So I love that, Susan. It was like perfect.
So there is a comment here from Nicole. Thank you, Nicole. She says springs and flexibility are huge. Fitness is a paramount, but many fit people lack flexibility. And some very fit riders hold tension due to nerves. So there's a good balance there, right? But let's contrast that picture that we just saw with the first people. There goes Patty's dogs again. Oh, she's... Oh,
there's all
okay. Yeah, there's a lot of pictures there. Let's check that one right there.
Okay, get her back.
All right.
Go.
It's kind of the opposite of standing up, even though he's going the opposite direction, right?
Yeah.
And you notice that he is well off the horse's back, but he is really centered over his feet. And while he's up off the horse's back, he's also, I'm going to say, close to the saddle. Certainly not up ahead of the saddle.
Right. He's over the seat, right?
Yeah.
He's not over the pommel like that other picture, right?
He's right over the twist. He's right in the middle, right at the neck of the seat to pommel. Same thing with.
And
she's just
God help poor Kathy Guzman if she stood up at a point like this, you know.
Right. Here
again, this is another speed picture. You notice that the horse is folded tight, and he's not flat, but he is definitely going fast and forward over that fence.
He's jumping for the money.
He is. Here again, she is not standing up. She's well up off the horse's back, which is nothing like standing up ahead. And you know what I think we should say is standing up ahead is the thing that we really have to get after people about. But I will say more about staying close to the saddle a little later when we've got a graphic to show you. So let's go on and see what else we've got here.
Laura, can you put Patty back in there again?
Patty is in, but she's behind the banner.
Oh, that's what happened. Okay,
can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
I put the dogs inside.
All right.
Again. there's actually a black bear across the road, and I can see it. So I'm surprised they make more noise.
How fun.
It's the first
Awesome.
bear this summer. So
I'm glad they're barking then.
exactly.
Well, yeah, good dogs.
Anyway, you have to love, and this is such a classic position, and I love where her hands are. The whole thing is pretty wonderful. But I do think that people get excited in their teaching. And they move on a little bit because little Susie wants to move on, and an instructor's job is to be able to keep it fun and moving forward without moving forward too fast. And it takes a lot of energy to teach like that and to teach those things. And so just as an instructor, just make sure your riders are ready to go forward, because it's so much easier to teach the right way than to unteach.
Yes.
And to redo it.
Oh, yeah.
And that's part of
the
reason we started doing these shows, is that there's really not a database for people to go to get this kind of understanding of what needs to be done with the riding position and the horses they're competing. This is pretty amazing.
Here's a suggestion for instructors. I have all those old black and white pictures, and I think I have a file folder of about 30 or so. And I print them out, hard copies, and I keep them in a folder. And when I teach a jumping clinic, I pass them around. And so many people have never seen the great ones jump, or the pictures, because, those are from an earlier era, and they're amazed to see them. That's a good thing to pass around among your riders. You could have some pictures, and they're available on the internet, and as long as you're not publishing them, it's okay to use them for teaching purposes. So show your riders the good pictures and the bad pictures, and that gives them an idea of why we are working on it. The other thing I'm going to suggest is instructors need a real wide range of interesting exercises at a low level, because when they run out of ideas, that's when people move students ahead inappropriately. So if you've got lots and lots and lots of exercises at the trotting ground poles and cross rails while they're getting their seat solid level, there's no real need to move them up a lot faster just to keep them from getting bored.
Right.
Exactly. I love it. I just teach a little bit now. I used to teach a lot, but I have one young lady that just wanted to jump bigger and bigger. And so I did this simple exercise of the poles in a circle with the number of strides between them at the canter. Show me you can do this at 4 strides, at 5 strides, at 3 strides. And she couldn't do it. And I said, so why can you jump higher? And so you do this. So sometimes the simplest exercise is the hardest to do.
Yes.
And it's the easiest on the horse. So it's like, okay, this is a piece of cake.
So you're saying, Patty, why should you jump higher if you can't steer your horse around a circle properly?
You can't steer around the circle and put the correct number of strides here. What makes you think you can do it bigger? So when you can sit down and you can make that happen, most of the time they're ready to move on. So they can move up a little bit and then do it with a small jump. And there's so many ways to make it learning and without jumping giant jumps, which again helps the horse also. So
this is the folding using the seat belt. So the previous one, we saw this with the center of gravity. This was in front of the rider. Now the correction for that is.
I love this seat belt idea. It gives a clear feeling of how riders stay closer to their seat instead of
these saddles that come with them next.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's a perfect one.
I have the center up a little bit here, but when I teach this, I will have people sit up straight and say, I want you to sit up tall like a dressage rider. Breathe out and drop your center way down until it feels like your center's touching the saddle. And then put on your imaginary seatbelt and leave your center back and down and fold over the seatbelt. So the center could be even farther back, but I think that's where the center of balance really is, and it's pretty much over the stirrup.
That's
No,
amazing.
right.
What an amazing illustration.
But it's
a great analogy because
Mhm.
everyone wears seatbelts.
You could do so much with computers. That would take me forever if I had to do it, with a pencil, but the computer lets you get away with things like that.
Excellent. So
the other thing is this could be done in no hands.
So Susan, we were also sorry, there must be
right.
a bit of a lag or something. We were also talking yesterday about how you can tell if you are kind of sinking and squatting into the saddle.
Yeah, let's look at that graphic on sinking. Okay, and here the rider is sinking. Now, this has nothing to do with getting left behind or hitting the horse in the back. But she started with a normal jumping position, and as the horse takes off, you want to sink. And your seat sinks backward. Your knees actually sink down a little on the saddle, so your knee can't be rigid or locked on the saddle. Your heels sink down. And you could even say your calf sinks into your horse's ribs. And I got this from George Morris many, many, many years ago.
Well, you
he
actually
would tell us he had these elements.
Excuse me for a minute, but you went through several master clinics with George, right? Didn't you go through like 10 of his master instructors?
Back in the 70s, I went to about a dozen of his instructor and trainer clinics. And he had a system where he would teach one element at a time, and then you added the elements as you went. Balance, eyes, sink, release, and finish. Now, you did balance first, then you added balance and eyes. Then you went balance, eyes, sink. Then it was balance, eyes, sink, release. And finally, balance, eyes, sink, release, finish. And by the time you got to finish, you had done balance like 5 times.
Right.
And all of them really he wanted those to become automatic. When they become automatic, then you can use your brain for other things like steering your horse or jumping a complicated course or adjusting your horse's stride. But you had to let those things, he said, isolate them, teach them separately, add them as they go. They don't have to be perfect, but you have to be ready so you're not giving them information overload. And sink was a really important one. So if you sink, your hip joint, your seat bones go backward, your heels go backward, but it's nothing like getting left behind. It just sinks you down close. And can you visualize the seatbelt on that rider as she sinks?
Yeah, I was just going to switch it back to show this. This is what you were talking about. Do you want to lower that? Yes. And you lower that by...
You're folding in this case, and folding is the opposite of standing. And then sinking takes it even further for security. And this is such a great cure for riders who want to stand up and get ahead of the horse. There's 2 ways to get ahead.
Folding is the opposite of standing. That's great.
Yep. Well, there's 2 ways to get ahead. One is position, where you stand up too far, and the other is timing, where you get up too soon. But if you are letting the horse fold you, that helps take care of timing. And if you are sinking, that will help keep you from standing up too far. Wow. So riders who get ahead feel really secure when they learn to sink.
I'm just taking notes.
We should go on to the next topic.
Are you taking notes too, Randy?
I know. There's so much information.
I mean, you've been teaching forever. I've been teaching forever, and we're still taking notes. Let the horse fold you.
If we're going to have time for questions, we probably better move on.
Yeah, exactly.
This is our next topic: stirrup placement for balance and keeping the spring in the rider's position.
Okay. Well, this is a little foot secret from centered riding. George Morris and many, many other equitation gurus have been telling us for a long time we should have the outside branch of the stirrup near the base of the little toe, and that the stirrup should actually be perpendicular to the horse's side and should cross under the rider's foot at an angle, because your toe naturally turns out to some degree. It's going to turn out about as much as your knees turn out, and it should never turn out farther than your knees. But if your toe is forced in while your knee is out, you have all kinds of stress in your ankle and knee joint, and even maybe in your hip joint, and that locks you up. So we'll go into angles more at a different time, maybe. But you notice that the brown is the horse's side, so the rider's toe is out slightly, and that causes that rotated stirrup position somewhere on the bottom of your foot, and it's going to be near the hollow of the back of the ball of the foot is the balance point of your foot, and it's also your major reflex point for balance and springs standing on our feet. If anybody's listening and you have shoes that come off easily, you can take your shoes off and rub around with your thumb
I just
near
did that.
the hollow of the ball of your foot.
Right.
If your shoes don't come off easily, you can turn your fingers into a little bird beak and go tap, tap, tap. Tap your toes. Oh, there we go. Good demonstration. Hey, we got bare feet too. If your shoes don't come off easily, tap the bottom of your toe, tap the bottom of your heel, and then tap around near the back of the ball of the foot until you find a place that feels different. It might feel more sensitive, might feel a little dull, and that place feels really good when you rub it. And then when you stand up on your feet, which I'm not going to do in front of the camera here, when you stand up on your feet, that is your balance point, and that is the human reflex point for our balance on our hind legs. Dogs don't have that in their hind paws. We can train a dog to walk on his hind legs, but he can't walk like a human because he doesn't have that reflex point in the same way we do. And your horses too. But we have it, and when we become aware of that spot, it activates your springs automatically, and it helps you balance. So if you can find that balance point, and we have to find it by feel, because the location varies a little bit. It could be a little more to the inside, outside, front, or back. It's not even exactly the same in the left and right foot. So you have to tap around till you feel it. And then I want some part of the stirrup thread to support it. So if you rotate your stirrups the way we've been told we should, you might have to rotate your stirrup a little more, a little less, slide it a little more forward, a little more back. And once you have located that spot by feel, by tapping or rubbing, if you slap the bottom of the stirrup upward, the rider should feel it go up through their leg. If they do, we found the right spot. And when that spot gets waked up, every time your horse moves, and especially in a jump, you get a little impulse through that spot, and that activates your balance and your springs. And the interesting thing is, once you found that spot, if the instructor puts their hands under the stirrup and the stirrup's on that spot, and we lift up, you can see all three joints, ankles, knees, and hips will flex. But if you then shift the stirrup to another spot, let's say generic under the ball of the foot, and you push up the same amount, those joints will feel locked. They won't flex as much. So we need to find the functional spot and make sure that some part of your stirrup tread supports it. Now, there are people where that spot is so far back it doesn't really look good. So they might have to really rotate their stirrup. And if you rotate your stirrup more, it looks like it's more forward than it really is. But it's really important to make sure that spot is supported. And then go out and ride a posting trot, do a little 2-point, and you'll be amazed at how much you can feel your feet, and your heels begin to relax down and use your joints instead of force them down.
So the stirrup, it looks like the stirrup should be perpendicular to your horse's side.
Right.
And
notice the stirrup crosses at a little bit of an angle to the foot.
Right.
Finding that spot. So they make the stirrups they have now, but they have so many different stirrups now. Some of the bar is so wide that it would be hard to find that spot. It's kind of interesting.
Well, I would find that spot with the foot out of the stirrup. And then when you put the foot in the stirrup, tap on the bottom of the stirrup and say to the rider, can you feel that? If they go, no, am I getting warmer, getting colder? Shift the stirrup around until they say, oh, wow, there it is. And you will find most people have one foot that's easy to feel and one foot that's a little harder.
Right.
If they're having a lot of trouble feeling it in the left foot, try the right foot. And once you found it in one foot, it's like the other foot now knows what it's looking for.
Oh, I see. Right. They talk to each other.
Yeah,
They do.
they talk to each other, exactly. So I love one of the few books I have left. I have a bunch of George's books, but I have the Sally Swift books, and I gave them to the scout who teaches at a place I go. I gave them all away because they were sitting there, and they keep saying, "You guys go back." It may have been written a while ago, but it is the right way to do things. And Susan, you are just hitting on so many cool things. We love that.
So now we're going to move on to our last topic,
Okay,
the releases.
Yeah. Well, we have basically 4 releases. There are a couple other, I'm going to say special purpose releases, but the 4 basic releases go in order. When you start people starting over fences, the first thing we are told is to grab mane. And if you learn to grab mane properly and you do it with good details, you are also learning a long crest release at the same time. Now, grabbing mane isn't just grab the mane and hang on with tooth and claw. You should have your leg in position. You should be folding up. You place your hands together, not one in front of the other, on top of the crest. And then with your top fingers, you pinch the roots of the mane, and you don't pull back on the mane. You squeeze it, and you press your hands forward on the neck. It's not leaning on your hands. George Morris taught this originally, and he said, he called it a primary release, which is for primary students. It's also the emergency release when things go wrong and the air is full of rails and trouble. He said, keep your arms strong and push against the neck as if you're trying to push the horse's neck away. And that keeps you from lying on your hands. If you do it with your arms limp, your upper body can flop right down on the neck. But if you put your hands in the right place and you push firmly with your forearms as though you wanted to push the neck away from you, that helps you find the spot. And it also helps push your hips back in that sink position. So you start out with grabbing mane over ground poles or grabbing mane on the flat, learning to push. And the reason for grabbing mane is not to keep the rider on, it's to protect the horse's mouth, so that if the horse stretches as he should, he doesn't get nipped in the mouth. Now, once you have practiced that enough, anchoring your fingers with mane, you could do it on a horse who had no mane or has a braided mane. And I know about the special braid and the special color that tells you where to put your hands. So this is the same place as grabbing mane, but instead you Velcro your knuckles to the neck. You can pinch a braid if you want, but that's actually going back a little to the primary release, and you press your hands as if you could push that neck away. So the primary release is really teaching you a long crest release. And notice that the rider's hands are about a third of the way up the neck. If she reaches for the ears, she will have to lie down on the horse's neck. And notice that she is not leaning on her hands. She's anchoring her hands, but her balance is in her body and her feet.
And she has that helmet.
Let's look at the short crest release.
Horse's neck.
Yep.
Great.
And that allows the horse freedom, and it keeps him from getting nipped in the mouth. Very important if you're not totally ready to do advanced stuff, and let's say you're jumping an oxer or a fence where the horse really has to stretch his neck, or a green horse where the horse might make a funny jump. You really need to anchor your hands so that you can't nip the horse in the mouth. Now, this is a short release, and notice her elbows are much more bent than the rider on the chestnut horse because her hands are back closer to the base of the neck. And this is what you would use over a vertical jump where the horse doesn't have to stretch his neck as much, especially if you had to turn or slow down or have special control on landing. When I was fox hunting, we had a particular jump. It was a coupe. And right after you jumped from level ground, but right after the coupe, within one stride, you had to make a 90-degree turn and go down a grassy lane. And there was no choice. Boy, you needed a short release on that one, because if you left it entirely up to your horse, you better have Velcro. So if you're going to turn on landing, or you need to change leads, or you need to have control when you land, the short release is a good idea. Not a good choice over a big oxer. Okay, and then let's look at the last one. And this is advanced jumping. This is, George Morris called it the automatic release. It's also called following through the air, or jumping on contact, or jumping out of hand, all those names. And it means that your hands are independent from your seat. Your legs and your seat belong to the horse, but your arms and shoulders are so free that your hands can be off the neck, and as the horse stretches his neck, he takes your hands and arms forward as much as he needs to, and as his head comes back, your arms just smoothly, like gravity, return back to the normal position. So it's not taking any support from the neck, it's maintaining the contact. I'll tell you how Gordon Wright taught me to do this. He had us coming down to a jump, and we were all riders who could do long release, short release, main release, and he had us practice long release, short release. He'd put one hand up and we do long release, and the next time he put the other hand up and we do short release. Then he told us, I want you to do a short release over this next fence, and I'm going to have my hand up, and don't you dare do the release until my hand drops. Well, Gordon Wright was ferocious, so believe me, you would not dare to release before he said so by dropping his hand. So we're coming in on contact, watching his hand. He never dropped his hand. So then we get to the jump, and just took your head forward through the air. And we achieved an automatic release because we were so afraid of Gordon Wright yelling at us. You can't do that until the riders have the independent seat and they have freedom in their shoulders and arms. If they're tight or stiff, if you make a mistake in auto release, the horse pays the price. So George Morris would say, you shouldn't be doing auto release unless you're jumping every day, you're jumping with really good form, you have an independent seat, and you could jump no hands. And even then, there will be times when maybe on a green horse, it's a better choice to use a long crest release or a short crest release. Depends on the circumstances. But George never intended the sequence to stop at crest release. The trouble is, the crest release was so easy and convenient that a lot of people went, well, darn, we can show like this. Why should we bother spending all that time doing auto release? And the auto release began to wither and die. So it really is the advanced release. It's the one that gives you the ultimate control. And if you look back to those classic riders, if you look back to the guy on the gray horse, Cone, and one of the best auto releases I can think of.
I think it was interesting. I actually got to judge. I was excited in Chicago. And what I noticed was a number of the riders were their hand was so independent of their body. And last time I judged there, they weren't like that. And I think people took the time during this pandemic to teach a little more instead of just horse show. I noticed a huge difference.
That's amazing. That's great.
Yeah, it was really cool. It was very cool.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
So we may get a boost in horsemanship.
Wouldn't that be nice?
It's nice to see some good things come out of this pandemic, isn't it?
Exactly.
But notice we already said he was a little farther down than would be perfect equitation form, although I think he is absolutely functional. But look at the straight line from the elbow to the bit. Look at how independent his hands are from his seat.
Whoa.
A lot of it is stirrup length. If the stirrups were too long, you just cannot get it because you can't fold up with the angles correct.
Exactly. I used to ride too long. You know, you made the comment about the warm bed and the thoroughbred, but back in the early 70s, I had a great job with a wonderful woman named Nina Bonney, and Nina, where I met George through Nina. But anyway, we were out riding, and she said, you know, if you jack your stirrups up 2 holes, Patty, you'd have a much more comfortable ride. And it was like magic.
Right.
But I've been taught to ride where I was, and that's where I thought it was supposed to be. And so sometimes they do ride with their stirrups too long.
Right.
So before we go, well, we're running out of time here, and there is this question from Colleen. Thank you very much, Colleen. And if you have any questions or comments, final questions or comments that we can run through quickly, please ask them or put them in the comments and we'll get to them. How much would any of this change, if at all, if you are doing a pre-Caprilli test in a dressage saddle? That's a great question.
I rode pre-Caprilli tests back in the day, and I would not ride a pre-Caprilli in a dressage saddle. I would ride it in an all-purpose saddle. And depending on the height of the fences, if the fences are no higher than Cavaletti height, you can have a good working, let's say, hunter seat equitation length of stirrup, and you can ride a training level dressage test in a little more vertical hunter seat. But if you try to ride it in a dressage saddle, for one thing, the stirrup bars are too far back, your stirrups will be too long, and when you do jump, you'll be ahead of the motion, and your legs may swing back, and you can't jump functionally with a deep-seated, long stirrup dressage seat. So for pre-Caprilli, the thing to remember is Caprilli was a jumping instructor. This is a jumping dressage test. It is not a dressage test with a couple of jumps in it.
Yeah. So you just have to kind of change your focus a little bit. Ride it in a stirrup length that allows you to jump well at whatever height. And if it's only Cavaletti height, it doesn't have to be that high. If, as back in the day, the fences were 3 feet, you better have 3 foot length stirrups, and you'll have to do your flat work with those stirrup. Thank you. That's Nicole. These are fantastic. Thank you, Susan, and all of you for putting these on. Thank you so much, Nicole. We appreciate it.
Susan, thank you so much for joining. I think Miss Susan needs to come back numerous times.
Exactly. I'm glad you said that, Patty, because guess when she's coming back? When?
Tomorrow.
We invited Susan to come back, and she's coming back on Wednesday for the Riding Position Fix-It show, 1 p.m. on June 24th. So mark your calendars.
Perfect.
She's going to be
judging at Ledges, but I'll be thinking about you guys.
Yep, and she's just going to go even deeper into everything we're doing with.
I'm going to watch. I'll actually watch a rerun.
It's pretty amazing, isn't it, to be able to listen to Susan? We're so Susan,
it's great, and thank you again for joining Randy and Laura and myself, and we loved having you. It was wonderful. Thank you.
Now we have 2 other shows. On Monday we have the Jay Duke show, and he's going to be talking about the fascinating life of U.S. team rider Carl Cook. So you can join Jay at the incredible journey of the Southern California Grand Prix star and his rise to fame. On June 26th, that's next Friday, we have Darla Walker Ryder. She's from the Certified Horsemanship Association. She's certified thousands of instructors, and we're going to be discussing a tough topic, but most of you are professionals in the horse business, and it's a business. It's the hardest thing to remember. So she's a master level certifier in riding instructor.
Okay, Randy, you're really breaking up there.
Is that me?
I think so.
That was Patty.
All
right.
Okay.
Anyway, so she's a master level riding instructor and certifier with the Certified Horsemanship Association. And the topic we're going to talk about is protecting your horse business, what professionals need to know that no one may have told them about.
So if you're joining us on Wednesday, the 24th at 1 p.m., Susan is coming back, and we are going to talk about how to fix that hollow back and what that means. We kind of touched on it today, but we're going to go, you've got some more graphics. Head and eyes and how they are so important to your riding success, as well as developing a secure and independent seat over fences. So thank you so much, Susan. Really appreciate it. I've made notes. I've been teaching for forever, and I've made notes
Right.
April says new drinking game. Anytime anyone says exactly take a drink of your choice would be lemonade. Okay.
I like that.
Lindy says these graphics were very helpful. Thank you so much. Lindy loves us. Thank you. Stacy says, I love this. We have to run, but we'll watch the reruns. I broke my third metatarsal jumping with boots that were too narrow for the springs in my feet. Oh my gosh. Colleen, I will work towards improving the dressage seat all-purpose saddle. Thank you. My homework. Yes. Thank you so much. And again, thank you again. See you today's Friday. So Monday night's Jay's show. Wednesday at 1 Eastern is a jumping position, riding position fix-it show. Then Friday is Randy's show. Thank you so much.
Yeah,
now go use this stuff.
Go use it. I'll see you on the other side of the fence. Do you have any final words you would like to share, Susan?
Oh, just enjoy it. And one of the ways to keep your springs good is breathe and smile.
Breathe and smile.
Breathe and smile.
All right. Well, we'll see you all. Bye, everybody.